Sheddington.
These were two dogs that I used to own, Lara and Curtly, who are flat-coated retrievers.
Oh, nice. Beautiful.
Enjoying a nice summer meadow there.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah.
Oh.
And most of you know that I'm a veterinary surgeon, and my story is that for many years I had a practice in Worthing in Sussex. And this is a picture taken about 30 years ago.
Oh, Peter. Oh, isn't that lovely?
That was shortly after I took over the practice. That was me with my team there. Looking very dapper, I may say, with a moustache, but my children wouldn't think so.
Oh, that's a great picture.
So I'm obviously no longer there now, and if I'm doing veterinary work, it's more likely to be this sort of thing. So this is me in my field hospital on a Greek island.
Wow.
And I make sort of periodic trips to go and neuter stray cats.
Oh.
In fact, I would have been in Greece this weekend actually if it hadn't been for the old coronavirus pandemic.
Wonderful.
Had to be
Must
cancelled.
have come over all queer.
Oh, that's brilliant. Really good.
Oh wow!
Like a cat waving to us.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, the cat's waving.
Sure you.
Help! I'm going down. Pause for thought.
Anyway, it might seem a bit of a busman's holiday doing all this, but we have good reasons for doing it, and one of them is this: we meet lots of nice people, have lots of nice food as well.
Another good picture. Yeah.
Of course, the scenery is amazing. This is one of the islands we go to, which is called Castellorizo. And this is on the island of Ithaca. And this building you can see actually is quite interesting. That here, these ruins in the foreground. This is reputed to be the School of Homer. So we were shown this by a Dutch lady who does walking tours on the island. So yeah, we get, as well as doing all the veterinary work, we get to meet lots of interesting people, and it's really fun. And that might be a topic for another time, maybe.
I'll say. Beautiful.
Anyway, again, talking about pets today, and as most of you know, our pets are descended from wild animals originally. In the case of dogs, from wolves, and they're genetically distinct now, of course. The earliest record of a genetically distinct domestic dog is about 15,000 years ago from archaeological remains in Germany. So archaeologists have suggested that maybe 20 to 40,000 years ago, Margaret, you'll know this, won't you? It's in the Pleistocene period, I think.
I'm actually very glad to be getting an update, because it was part of what I taught a long time ago. But I think I've heard inklings, so you'll know more on this latest stuff than I do.
I'm not sure about that anyway. But yes, some people even suggest it might have been a single domestication event which led to the branching of the ways. But be that as it may, it's certainly around that time, 20 to 40,000 years ago, dogs, domestic dogs as we know them, started to emerge. And cats weren't far behind. We often think of the Egyptians when it comes to cats, but actually their origins seem to date back to Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq. And the earliest remains that have been found of a domestic cat come from a 12,000-year-old grave in Cyprus.
Gosh.
So there we are. Cats, too, have been domesticated for many thousands of years, but it's fair to say they've had a more checkered history than dogs. In Egypt, they were worshipped as gods, and there was the death penalty for killing a cat. But they had this extraordinary papal bull in 1233 where the cats were denounced as in league with Satan. And it wasn't really until the Enlightenment period that they were reinstated as pampered pets. And this lovely quote that cats have never forgotten being worshipped as gods, which is probably true when you look at their attitude. Does anyone know where this cat, who it is and where it is even.
Mm-hmm. It's not the adult college, is it?
No. This is actually Dr. Johnson's cat.
Oh,
Samuel Johnson, the diarist, had a cat called Hodge, whose favourite food was oysters. So you can see him there with an oyster. And this statue is outside Samuel Johnson's old house in Gooch Place, just off Fleet Street.
wow.
If you're up there, it's worth making a little detour to find him sitting there still.
Oh, how fabulous.
Haughtily.
Like I've seen that.
Oyster.
Quite hidden away.
It looks like the cat was able to read as well.
Yes.
It certainly looks like a
Sitting
lot
on
of
a book.
oysters have gone down. It's got it.
Yeah.
Sitting on a book. Yeah.
Very haughty stare there. I think it's this
Yes, very
godlike, isn't he? Yeah.
fantastic.
Anyway, so from that one event, of course, we got all the modern dog breeds that we know today. And one of the earliest dog breeds that's still in existence is this, which is the Basenji dog. And they go back about 8,000 years, actually, 6,000 BCE. And they were sort of hunting dogs. They're thought to be the dogs seen in cave drawings from Libya. And they have one very interesting characteristic, actually. I don't know if anyone knows what it might be. Well, they don't bark, interesting enough. They've got the anatomy of their vocal, their larynx is different. They have very shallow vocal folds, so they don't make a resonant noise in the same way. And it's thought that this was an advantage for them in hunting because they couldn't bark and scare the prey. But it's a strange noise. Some people describe it as yodeling, which is interesting. So most of the breeds we have now actually have only really originated in the last few hundred years. This is a plate from a Victorian book showing breeds of dog. And it's led to what we have now, which is this huge, huge. Time really to think that both these dogs are descended from the same line, and that has been brought about purely by human breeding. But of course, there is a downside to this as well, and this is an example of the extremes of this. And this is you have to excuse me if I'm preaching a little bit, because this is kind of like a bête noire of mine. But these two dogs, two examples of a French bulldog. But as you can see, somewhere along the line, someone decided that it was cute to have dogs that looked more like humans with a flat face. So they've been bred to have no nose. And of course, the problem with this dog still has to fit all the same anatomical structures into that restricted space. So you've got teeth all higgledy-piggledy because they can't fit in. You've got a tongue that's too big for its mouth. You've got a soft palate that hangs over the back of the tongue into the airway. And yes, the last veterinary practice I was in, we saw several of these, and it was probably the most dispiriting aspect of my work, because you start off by having to do a little operation on the dog's nostrils to open up its airways. And then quite often they'd have to have their soft palate shortened to enable them to breathe. Some of them even have, you can see these folds on the face here, and some of them even have to have the folds of skin removed because they get a lot of dermatitis in them. That's like 3 separate operations just to enable this dog to live a normal life. So definitely the worst side of breeding, if you like. And I think it's just worth mentioning, we've been talking about on the macro scale, what we humans are doing to the planet, but also just on a micro scale, things like this, we can really mess with nature. Anyway, in the context of what we're talking about, summer problems, of course, this is very significant, because do you know how dogs keep cool?
Breathing, panting.
That's right, yes. So dogs, they don't have sweat glands in the same way that we do. Actually, the only concentration of sweat glands is on the feet. They can't sweat to keep cool like we do. They can only pant. So, of course, if you get dogs like that, because you've got a restricted airway, or if they're wearing a muzzle, that means they can't pant to cool it down, and they're at risk of getting heat stroke. Similarly, if you've got a dog, there's a bit of a fashion for having huskies and dogs like that, which are bred for winter conditions. They've got a really thick coat. They also can have are in danger of getting heat stroke in the summer. So it's worth bearing in mind. They need keeping cool and not to go walking in the hot sunshine.
Adrian, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, I do.
If huskies are over here for a few generations, does the hair reduce the fur? Will it adapt to the local climate?
I think that would take longer. In theory, yes, that would happen, but it would probably take many generations as opposed to breeding, which can cause changes like we saw in that bulldog in just 1 or 2 generations.
Right.
Yeah. So let's look at something else now. Oh, yes, I was just going to say cats, of course, don't have these problems because they're much more sensible. This was a cat that I met in Greece, and yes, if they in hot weather, they just want a nice cool spot and relax. Yeah. Oh, yes.
Do they? Sorry, Peter. Do cats? How do they sort of lose heat then? Do they?
Well, they will pant. Yes, they also don't have sweat glands, so they would pant as well. But it's actually very rare because they're much more adept at just finding a cool space and resting. And you don't see cats, running around chasing after balls as dogs do.
No.
Yeah, just in case you're interested, you can see this cat has had the tip of its ear removed, and that's because it's a wild cat, and that's to show it's been neutered.
And presumably it would lose quite a bit of heat from its ears by radiation.
Yes, they can do actually. Yes, the ears do get very, if it's hot, you notice the veins engorge and get very red. Yeah. So what about this?
Oh.
Can you guess what's going on here?
Oh, bee clawed.
Oh yes. Oh goodness.
both these animals. Yeah, that's right. They've been stung.
Oh.
It's perhaps one of the most comical things we tend to see as vets is because when animals have been stung, they swell up to this comical extent. With dogs, it's usually the nose, because you can imagine a dog is poking its nose into things and sniffing around, whereas cats are more likely to get stung on the foot because they will pat at a bee or a wasp. And the good news about this from a veterinary point of view is it's very rarely serious anyway. It looks far worse than it is, and the animals are normally carrying on as though nothing had happened. So unless they've got distressed breathing or seem unwell in any other way, you usually don't have to worry about it. You can give them antihistamines, apply cold compresses if they'll let you, but apart from that, it'll just go down itself in a few hours, which is a relief. Now, in the summer, what could be nicer than a walk in the fields? Well, the only problem is if you find grass like this. Now, Mark, I don't know if you had this problem with forest at all, have you?
Yeah, lots of time.
Because we've got a cocker spaniel, they got quite long ears, of course.
Oh gosh, yes. So this grass, Hordeum spontaneum, sort of like a wild barley grass, is the usual culprit, and particularly when you get these sort of dried seeds like this. And I don't know if you've ever seen them. It's quite fascinating. If you pick one up and put it between your fingers, you find it's got little microscopic spines on it, which means it can only move one way in the direction of the arrow. So if you get that between two surfaces that rub, then the grass sort of slowly but surely works its way in, even to the point of penetrating the skin. So this is a typical thing that you'll see in a dog. A little swelling between the toes where a grass seed's got in. And when I was in practice, these were the bane of my life, because you might think it'd be very easy with that to let's go back again, to make a little hole there and pick out the grass seed, but they carry on moving once they're under the skin. This is a dog that's been up, and you can see actually that the grass seed's gone in here, but actually it's come out here.
Wow.
So Yeah, I don't know if you've had this, Mark, but they can be quite frustrating from a vet's point of view. You sort of you make an incision to find the grass seed and it's not there, and it emerges a little way further up.
We had that very thing happen, Peter. Yeah, it went quite a long way up. And we heard a story that on one animal, it went right up to the back.
Yes.
It was near their spine or something, wasn't it? We were told. Yeah, through their foot, kept going.
That's right. Yeah.
It must be quite difficult to find them. How would you find it, I suppose, is the question.
Well, yes, there have been some, I must admit, where I had to go back a second time because it wasn't obvious, and then it popped up a bit later on. But normally there is a track you can follow, and it's we have these sort of forceps, sort of what we call crocodile forceps, with a long, thin shaft and a tiny pincers at the end, and we put those in the hole and go poking around to try and find this grass seed.
You have to push it. Do you have to push it through, or can you pull it back? Like you do in a fish hook.
You generally can pull it back if you get a good hold of it. Yes. Yeah.
Can you use ultrasound for something like that?
You could potentially, yes. That's another possibility. Certainly.
Yeah. Maddie's had seeds in her ears because she's half Cocker Spaniel.
Yes. And this is exactly that, Arthur. So this is a grass in the ear, and they can again work their way in and penetrate the ear. So yes, good tip if you. I'm sure you do this, Mark. Anyways, is with dogs like spaniels that have long hair, is to keep the hair trimmed around the ears and between the toes, and always check it after a walk to make sure they haven't picked up any seeds on the way.
I didn't know about trimming the hair. We'll never try that.
Yeah, it's not too difficult.
No,
we've got some clippers, but
we cut it under his armpits as well because he had one under there once. So when we can go to groomers, I always get them to cut under his paws really short and then under his armpits really short. But we missed one this time because he hadn't been to the groomer, and we did it ourselves, and I think it got into a bit of a mat under his armpit.
Gosh. Yes.
But that one wasn't as bad as the one that went up his leg because they could get it under just as sedation. Whereas the leg one, he had to have a full anaesthetic.
Sometimes you do.
So far up, yeah.
Yeah. No, definitely worth a case where prevention is better than cure here, isn't it?
Yeah. Very good.
Now, what about this? It's summer, it's barbecue time. What could be wrong with a bit of corn on the cob on the barbecue or a nice peach afterwards?
Stems.
Very nice, that's right. The problem is what they leave behind, and we may have discarded them, but the corn on the cob with its butter on, or the peach stone with bits of flesh, are still very attractive to dogs. And the problem with these is twofold, really. Firstly, they're vegetable matter, so if the dog swallows them, they're not so easy to see on X-ray. They don't show up on X-ray. As you say, Chris, nowadays probably ultrasound would help you to pick them up, but they're not immediately visible themselves. And the other thing is, you can see from the surface, they have this rough surface, and if you've got something like a Labrador, a corn on the cob is the perfect size. It just fits into the intestine. For something like a Cocker Spaniel, a peach stone is just about the right diameter to fit in the intestine. And so, of course, what happens is these they work their way along, and as they do so, they rub and they cause damage. Eventually, they block, and that's usually when you notice the animal's ill, because they start to show signs of going off their food, being sick, and so on. But by then, often these things already cause quite a lot of damage. So, again, it's really important if you've got animals around just to be careful of things like this. Any discarded fruit stones, corn cobs, make sure they're cleared up and aren't left around to be picked up by a browsing dog.
Interesting you should say that, Peter. We had a Labrador many years ago, and I could still remember Barney taking one of those. Fortunately, it passed through, but it wasn't a very pretty sight, and the dog, Barney's face was really drooping all the time, so he's obviously not having much fun with it, but I guess we were very lucky.
I think you were, yes. I have I did once have a dog that died from this because it kept moving through the bowels, and of course, if it does that, the dog would not be too sick at first. It's only when they stop that the dog is really sick. And by the time it stopped, then as I said, it had already done quite a lot of damage. So, yeah, I think it obviously depends on the size of the dog, the size of the corn, but I think that was a lucky escape there, Jerry.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and that's the trouble with dogs, isn't it? I mean, they eat all sorts of things, don't they?
Yeah, we had a Great Dane who stole a piece of meat that had the barbecue, one of those bamboo skewers. We didn't know it, and of course, it wasn't until he stopped eating and got sick, and they ended up having to do several surgeries on him, that the barbecue skewer had punctured his intestines.
Gosh, yes.
And it was both very upsetting, very, very traumatizing, and very costly. But so we will never have those in our household again. Suffice to say.
Not surprised. Yeah, not surprised.
Yeah.
Even when you cry.
Yeah, it was a lot. But
of course, yes. No, that's I can imagine that's very traumatizing, Stuart.
Yeah, it was. Those things can. It just was just sitting there. You didn't even think about it. So, they can just grab it and you don't even notice.
Yeah, and that's dogs will eat all sorts of things, won't they? Our dog Curtly, we once had some Brussels sprouts, and we had an open vegetable rack, and we noticed they disappeared. And we worked out what happened when these noxious gases were coming from underneath the table. there was the dog with the empty stalk from the Brussels sprouts, and all the Brussels sprouts have been consumed.
Oh dear.
And this was another favourite of Curtly's. Here we are.
Oh.
Now, if you're going on a walk, you might encounter one of these.
Yeah.
Now, cow dung has many uses, of course. It's used as fertilizer. It's used as a building material, and might be interesting to know that in India, panchagavya, medicine made with cow dung, urine, milk, yogurt, and ghee, is actually said to cure cancer and prolong life. So,
does it prolong the life whilst you're taking it, or when you stopped it?
I pass this on, but this is interesting, Chris. It's a quote from 1841.
A cataplasm.
Still used by the lower orders as a cataplasm for bruise and sprains.
Still used by the lower orders. Yes.
So you lower orders out there,
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yes.
Says the Reverend C.H. Hartshorn. Yes.
But how does a dog see this?
Food.
Well, this is how Curtly.
Oh, golly.
The crust baked hard by the sun, just waiting to be licked off so the liquid contents could be enjoyed within.
Oh, that's my last trip to France dealt with.
There's some in my fridge.
You better keep it there. Oh, wow.
It's a question that we often get asked as vets: why do dogs eat poo? And the truth is, nobody really knows. It's not a dietary deficiency, as often being thought. It's thought that in nature they do it to clean up their environment and also to remove the scent of other dogs. There's a little tip for you that apparently if you feed your dog pineapples and courgettes, it makes the feces less palatable. Now, I don't know who discovered that and how they worked out the feces were less palatable, but I'll just leave that there for you.
Right.
Yeah, I was just wondering if that's been lifted from a medical book. Maybe the lower orders do that sort of thing.
That's it.
Ask your reverend, whatever his name was, Chris.
Yes.
This is something we were recommended by an animal behaviouralist.
Oh,
You can sprinkle the feces with Tabasco sauce to make them less palatable. Now, I'm not sure who would really do this. I mean, first of all, you've got to put up with the fact that if you're out there sprinkling Tabasco sauce on feces, people are going to look at you and think you're kind of weird, aren't they? Really. But I think also, in my experience, if you do this, the dog's just going to look at you and say, "Is that the best you've got?" you couldn't find a California Reaper or even a Hungarian hot wax. This is just seasoning. Yum yum yum. Hey, this is great. You want some? No, please yourself.
Look, tweeting. Leslie just informed me she's getting a set. Yeah, Leslie just informed me she's the tweeting and the new set of robins in the shed this morning.
Oh, lovely. Oh, isn't that smashing?
We don't know how many are today. We haven't told each other. They're probably today have come in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Apparently robins like tobacco.
Do they?
No, not really.
Well, I think with dogs, you just have to accept that some dogs like the taste. Okay, but if they do, don't let them.
Tabasco face, eh? He's just had a chili.
Yeah. So funny.
Yeah.
So, Peter, I suppose it tells us that animals, or certain animals, can eat a lot of stuff that we couldn't really eat ourselves. So, is there anything to say about that? How, keeping things clean, etc. Does it matter so much with pets that everything's got to be all clean and stuff? Because their stomachs are different; they can tolerate all kinds of stuff.
That's right, but the reverse is also true, Mark, because there are some things that we can eat happily, which animals can't tolerate. So, for instance, onions can cause anemia in some dogs, and some dogs also are very sensitive to something in grapes, particularly in raisins, and there have been cases of dogs having severe kidney failure from having eaten raisins. So there's these strange, anomalies in terms of what they would tolerate. But yes, generally speaking, I guess you'd say that they will eat all sorts of rubbish that we wouldn't dare contemplate. So yes, I think you could say from that you wouldn't have to worry too much about disinfecting their bowl every time or whatever.
I was told once not to eat raisins. It's to do with the oxalates that give you kidney stones.
Oh, right.
I love them.
Cats haven't got much of a look into this, have they? As I said, I think they're generally much more sensible. This is a cat that in Greece on something that's known as the flower steps for obvious reasons in Castelorizo, and they generally don't go running around getting hot or eating all sorts of rubbish they shouldn't eat. Just to mention, for being sensible for a moment, that probably the most important thing for cats is parasite treatment. So in the summer, keeping them free of fleas and worms, that sort of thing. But it's worth bearing in mind that cats actually are sensitive to a lot of to common parasiticides that are used in dogs, particularly the ones you buy over the counter. And they'll usually have a warning on them just to say, if you've got a cat, never give it a flea or worm treatment that's been made for a dog, because they can be quite toxic. This little fella here looks quite concerned by all that.
Our sister lost a cat because they think it drank a little bit of antifreeze from the drive.
Oh yes, that's something you have to watch out for with cats. Yeah,
awful, poor thing, an awful death.
Yeah.
Peter, can I ask, is butter safe for cats? Because this neighbour's cat, as soon as we put a plate down that's had a sandwich or something, it goes absolutely mad for the butter.
Yes, they do go.
Can it harm it?
Yeah, no, they're in fact, that's something that's often recommended for trying to get pills down cats is coating them in butter. Yes, because that's a whole story in itself, isn't it? Giving cats pills. I see lots of amusing stories on the internet about giving cats pills, which usually end up with the the person trying to do it going to hospital with bites and scratches all down their arm. So just one last thing I was going to mention was about rabbits. I don't know if anyone's got rabbits, but actually a really common problem is fly strike. And you can see this is a picture of a rabbit's fur with blowfly eggs laid in it.
Oh, God.
And these eggs are laid that the flies are often attracted by soiling, so these will be laid around the rear end of the rabbit. Of course, then you get rabbits, maggots hatching out and causing damage, which can be quite extensive. Actually, this is been treated afterwards, but you can see that skin there where the maggots have been eating away. So it's a big problem, unfortunately, with pet rabbits, particularly if they're kept in hutches, because they often don't have freedom to move around and look after themselves. They often, and an interesting thing with rabbits is they really need a very, very poor diet. They're designed to digest hay and grass, and when we have them as pets, we often feed them all sorts of treats which actually aren't good for them. They cause them to have loose stools, and that's what attracts the flies in the first place. So it's really a question of keeping them on a fairly basic diet of mainly hay or grass. And of course, if you've got a pet rabbit, just check it at least twice a day in summer to prevent this sort of thing from happening.
So you're looking for dry pellets in the rabbit hutch, and that indicates that the rabbit's in good health, whereas moist pellets perhaps might indicate a problem.
That's right, Steve. Yes. Interesting, although you probably won't see it in a normal healthy rabbit. They do produce moist pellets overnight, but they have this way of producing a soft pellet, then eating it and digesting it again. And that's because, like many animals, they can't digest the cellulose in grass and hay themselves. They rely on bacteria in their gut to do it. And ruminants like cows and sheep have the bacteria in their stomach, so the cellulose gets broken down there. In the rabbit, those bacteria are in the cecum, which is in the hind part of the gut. So the first time through, they don't get the full benefit of it. And usually what happens overnight is the rabbit will produce a soft pellet, which again, and it goes through a second time. And then the pellets you do see, as you say, those hard little balls, which are indication of a healthy rabbit.
That's amazing.
Do guinea pigs get the fly strike as well? I sometimes look after a guinea pig for neighbours.
It's much less common, Margaret, actually. I think I've only ever seen one case of it. Generally, they seem much less susceptible to this problem of loose stools and soiling in the back end there. Yeah.
I've not seen it, but because I look after, we were meant to be in our house in France on holiday, and I'd have been looking after the guinea pig and the cats, but they're still at home, so I'm not.
Yes, no, I think guinea pigs are generally a lot more trouble-free than rabbits. Rabbits have become very popular as pets in recent years, and again, sadly, a lot of the problems that we see are down to the way we keep them, and if you've got a rabbit that you're in a hutch, first of all, it's not getting that freedom to move around and groom itself, look after itself. And secondly, if it's not having the right sort of food, not only do you get these problems that we've seen here with flies, but also they don't wear their teeth down properly. So unlike ours, rabbits' teeth are constantly growing because they need to keep sharp edges on them to cut up the hay and make it more digestible. So that means if they're not having an adequate diet and the teeth aren't getting worn down, they start to get overgrown, and then you have to grind them back down for the rabbit. So yes, it's. I'm not sure that they are a good pet, actually. So they are much more popular now. But if you do have rabbits, or people do have rabbits, then they need to be given plenty of space, given a proper diet, which means not too much fancy foods, really, so they can live as natural a life as possible.
A tenant in a flat we had a while back had a house rabbit, and I house sat for the house rabbit if they went away. But he had the freedom of the flat sort of thing. He was great, very clean.
Yes, people do keep them, don't they?
Mm.
A client did that as well. Yeah.
You say you check the rabbit twice a day for these eggs or maggots. Is it that quick?
It literally can. Yeah, Arthur. I mean, in the space of 24 hours, those eggs could have hatched out and be,
Wow.
started feeding on the rabbit. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm. So sorry to leave you with a rather gory picture, but it's just something to bear in mind.
Isn't it?
Now,
could I ask a question, Peter? When we go to France, there's lovely little cats that hang around the farm next door, which isn't an active farm anymore. But we often see new sort of little batches of kittens and stuff. But quite often on one or two of them, or on the adults, one will find a tick or two. What's the best way of dealing with a tick in a cat?
I think if you can handle the cat, then removing the tick manually is the best way. I mean, you can do it with tweezers. You can also buy now nifty little things in the shape of a hook, which goes under the tick. And actually, if you can get the mouth parts and twist it in sort of a circular motion, the ticks very quickly loosen their grip and come off.
Right.
And can be squished. But otherwise, you can get treatments for ticks. I don't like them very much because they are quite potent chemicals, and if you already treat them for fleas and you're putting on this as well, it seems quite a lot. But generally speaking, in Northern Europe, that you'll only get isolated ticks. You won't get in Greece. Sometimes I've seen we've had dogs brought into us which have literally their whole ear is covered in ticks, and it can be quite a job picking all those off. But in our regions, we often just get the odd one or two. So I think the most practical way is again, if you're checking a pet, if it's been out in the grass in summer particularly, and picking these off as you find them is probably the best approach.
Right, thank you.
Yeah.
Peter?
Yeah.
What's the most interesting or challenging animal that you've treated in your career?
Oh gosh, Joe, there's plenty actually. We used to get quite a few reptiles brought into us. I had one client who bred pythons and boa constrictors, and he would bring them down. He'd wrap them up in a duvet cover and bring them down to surgery with them, and it was quite amusing to see him sitting there because there'd be people sitting next to him, and they'd be looking at this duvet cover on the floor, and then it would start slowly writhing, and you could see them backing away.
Oh dear!
Fantastic.
Yes, snakes.
Are you noticing more exotic pets coming into people's homes? Obviously, we see programs at the airport where people smuggle in birds and other animals. Are you seeing a big increase in the exotic pet?
I think when I was in practice, Steve, it would go in waves. These things seem to go in and out of fashion, really, and sometimes you get a lot of people wanting to keep a particular type of pet, like maybe chinchillas or turtles. I once went down to there's a place in Somerset, actually, yes, where they had a vivarium, a large vivarium, where they had snakes and other reptiles, and they had a whole pool full of red-eared terrapins. And they said that after the Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles, people would go out and buy these terrapins. And of course, they buy them in a pet shop when they're about the size of a 50 pence piece.
Yeah.
And these things grow bigger and bigger until they're about the size of a small plate. If you're keeping them inside, they start to smell, and then people just want to get rid of them. So, fashions like that can be a real problem sometimes.
Mm.
So I'm just conscious we haven't, obviously just a bit of a canter through a few ideas. There's some references here which I can share with anyone who's interested for some useful sources for first aid information and advice on pet care. But I'll just leave you with a picture of my dog Curtly. It's just another talent he had, apart from eating Brussels sprouts and cow pats. He could be. This was in July, I think it was. It could be in the middle of summer, in the middle of a drought. You take him for a walk, and he'd be sure to find the one puddle that existed, and then go and roll in it. But that's dogs for you, anyway.